There's a moment when you just know. He's there, but something feels off. The warmth in his voice fades. The way he used to look at you, like you were the only thing in the world, now feels distant, like he's already somewhere else. And the worst part? He won't say it. Men don't always announce when they stop loving you. They won't have a deep, soul-searching conversation about why their feelings have changed. Instead, they withdraw, slowly, quietly, until one day, you wake up and realize you're in love with a ghost of the man he used to be. And if you've ever found yourself asking, is he pulling away, or am I just imagining it? You're not alone. This is where Stoicism changes everything. Because love isn't about clinging to what was. It's about seeing reality for what it is, without fear, without denial, without losing yourself in the process. In this video, we'll uncover the 8 undeniable signs that a man's love is fading. More importantly, I'll show you how to respond, not with desperation, not with heartbreak, but with grace, self-respect, and unwavering strength. Because when someone stops choosing you, the greatest power you have is knowing when to walk away first. Comment below if you've ever felt this shift. If you've sensed a love slipping through your fingers before you even had the chance to hold on. Let's talk. 1. Silence replaces affection. It never happens all at once. Love doesn't die in a single moment. It fades quietly, almost unnoticeably, until one day you wake up and realize it's gone. You feel it before you can explain it. The warmth in tow, his voice turns into something distant. His presence becomes an obligation rather than a desire. And the silence? That's the loudest part of all. A man in love doesn't just tell you. He shows you. Through his words, his actions, his energy. But when that love begins to disappear, the first thing to change is how he communicates. His words become fewer. His responses feel forced. The long conversations that once lasted for hours are reduced to cold, short exchanges. At first, you tell yourself he's just tired, just distracted, just going through something. But the truth is always there, lingering in the spaces between the words. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Love, too, is like this. You cannot cling to what was. You can only face what is. And when a man grows silent, when he begins to withdraw, he is not asking for more effort. He is revealing that something has already changed. Anna had always believed love was something you fought for. She and Michael had been together for a decade, long enough to build a life, long enough to believe in forever. Their conversations used to stretch into the early morning hours, effortless and full of meaning. But then, silence started to creep in. He stopped asking how her day was, stopped noticing the little things. The texts became one-word replies. And when she spoke, it felt like he wasn't really listening. She did what most women do. She tried harder. She sent longer messages. She asked more questions. She made more effort to fill the growing space between them. But the more she tried to hold on to the connection, the more he seemed to slip away. One night, as they sat in the living room, she turned to him and asked, "Do you still love me?" He hesitated, eyes flickering toward the television. "Of course," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. His body remained turned away. His presence, though physically there, was somewhere else entirely. She felt the answer in his silence. Stoic woman does not chase words. She does not beg for explanations that are already written in the way he withdraws. She observes, accepts, and decides. Imagine standing in a field of wildflowers. The man you love is there, tending to the garden with you. He waters the soil, nurtures the roots, and together, You watch everything bloom. But one day, he stops. The flowers still stand tall at first. The leaves still whisper in the wind. But over time, the petals begin to fade. The stems grow weaker. The once vibrant colors start to dull. You have two choices. You can keep watering the flowers alone, pouring everything you have into something he has already abandoned. Or you can accept the truth. This garden was never meant to be tended by one person alone. Anna finally stopped fighting against the silence. She stopped filling the void with her words, hoping it would pull him back. Instead, she let the space exist. She allowed the silence to speak for itself. And in that quiet, she saw clearly. His love had already left long before she ever thought to ask. A woman who knows her worth does not beg for attention. She does not chase a man's affection, hoping to revive what he has already let go. She does not mistake silence for a puzzle to solve. Silence is not an invitation to try harder. It is a truth waiting to be recognized. When a man stops speaking, stops reaching out, stops choosing you in the way he once did, do not run after him. Do not try to force words into spaces where his presence has already left. Stand still, listen, and then, with quiet strength, walk away first. 2. He's there, but not really. There. A man doesn't leave all at once. His body stays, but something inside him is already walking away. You sit beside him, but he feels miles apart. You speak, but his mind is somewhere else. And suddenly, presence turns into absence, not in a physical sense, but in the way that matters most. Love is not just about being next to each other. It's about being seen, felt, connected. When that connection starts to fade, you don't always hear it. You feel it. You feel it in the weight of his silence, in the way he no longer meets your eyes with the same warmth, and how his laughter no longer carries the same depth. You tell yourself it's temporary, that life gets busy, that things will go back to the way they were. But deep down, Epictetus once said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. The same applies to relationships. Love isn't about filling time together. It's about being present in that time. And when a man stops showing up fully, when his presence becomes an empty shell of what it used to be, you are not imagining things. You are seeing the truth. Lily had been married for 3 years. In the beginning, she and James made a promise. Twice a month, no matter how busy life got, they would go on a date. A small tradition, a way to stay connected. And at first it was effortless. They laughed, shared stories, lingered over dinner. The world faded away when they were together. Then, something shifted. At first, it was subtle. James would check his phone more often. His laughter felt delayed, like he was reacting out of habit rather than feeling the moment. The conversations that once flowed easily now had pauses. Small, almost imperceptible gaps, like spaces where something used to be. Lily tried to ignore it. She convinced herself it was stress, exhaustion, a temporary phase. But as the weeks passed, she noticed something deeper. He was still sitting across from her, still nodding, still responding. But he wasn't really there. Their dates became mechanical, like a duty rather than a desire. She would ask him questions, and his answers would be vague. When he held her hand, it felt lighter, like the grip of someone who wasn't entirely sure he wanted to hold on. One evening, as they sat at a candlelit table, she watched him scroll through his phone while she spoke. And for the first time, she didn't feel frustration. She felt clarity. She could spend the rest of her life trying to pull him back, or she could accept that he had already begun to drift. A woman's beauty is not just in how she looks. It's in the way she feels to those who truly see her. It's in the way she carries herself, the way her presence draws people in. And when a man stops being drawn to you, not because you have changed, but because he has stopped choosing to be present, it is not your job to chase after him. Imagine a mirror that once reflected light perfectly. It captured everything. Your smile, your laughter, the depth of your emotions. But slowly, dust begins to gather. At first, you don't notice. The reflection still exists, just slightly dimmer. But over time, the dust thickens, and one day, you look into that mirror and realize you can barely see yourself anymore. A relationship is a reflection. When love is clear, you see each other fully. But when one person stops wiping away the dust, when their effort fades, so does the reflection. Lily stopped trying to force James to be present. She didn't demand longer conversations, didn't beg for attention, didn't try to force connection where it was already unraveling. Instead, she became present in her own life. She invested in herself, in her passions, in the things that made her feel alive. And as she did, she saw something remarkable. When she stopped chasing his presence, she reclaimed her own. A Stoic, woman does not plead for someone's attention. She does not attempt to hold on to a version of love that once existed. She sees what is real, and she acts accordingly. If a man is drifting, let him drift. If he no longer meets you in the space you once shared, do not shrink yourself to fit the emptiness he leaves behind. Stand tall. Be fully present in your own life. And if his absence speaks louder than his presence ever did, listen. 3. A stranger in someone you once knew. You don't recognize him anymore. At first, the changes are small. His tone shifts. The way he speaks to you no longer carries warmth. The inside jokes, the shared laughter, things that once made your connection feel unshakable, begin to fade. You feel it, but you convince yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself love evolves, that people grow. But deep down, there's a question you don't want to answer. Is he changing, or is he leaving? A man doesn't just wake up one day and stop loving you. It happens gradually, like the tide pulling away from the shore. And when love fades, so does the version of him that once felt like home. He is still there, but something is different. The way he looks at you has shifted. The way he reacts to you has lost its ease. You try to reach for the person he used to be, but it feels like grasping at a shadow. No matter how hard you hold on, there's nothing solid left. Seneca once wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Sometimes, the hardest thing to accept is that the person who once loved you is no longer the same, and no amount of effort on your part will bring him back. Sarah had been with Daniel for 2 years. They had met through work, bonded over their shared passion, spent hours discussing projects and dreams. Their love was effortless, filled with late-night movie marathons and endless conversations. They had their rituals, Sunday mornings at their favorite cafe, weekend adventures to new places, and a deep love for action-packed adventure films. But lately, Daniel had changed. At first, it was small things. He started watching movies alone, claiming he wanted something different. He dismissed the things they once loved together as childish. "You still like that kind of stuff?" "I feel like I've outgrown it." His words were lighthearted, but they carried weight. Sarah laughed it off, told herself people change, that maybe she just needed to adjust. But it didn't stop there. He no longer looked at her the same way. Conversations that once flowed easily now felt forced. The things that once made her special in his eyes now seemed like inconveniences. She found herself second-guessing. Was I always like this? Am I the one who needs to change? One evening, as she sat beside him on the couch, she asked if he wanted to watch one of their favorite movies. He sighed, barely looking up from his phone. "You watch it. I'll do something else." Something inside her cracked. She realized she was holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. She was trying to bring back the man who once laughed with her, admired her quirks, celebrated her passions. But that man was gone. Not because of anything she did, not because she wasn't enough, but because love, when it fades, doesn't always take the person with it. It simply changes them into someone you no longer recognize. A relationship is like a shared melody. In the beginning, both people are playing in harmony, creating something beautiful. But when one person starts playing a different tune, when they drift, evolve, or lose interest, you can either force yourself to adjust to their rhythm, or you can step back and recognize that the song you once knew is no longer the same. Sarah made a choice. She stopped trying to force him to see her the way he once did. She didn't beg for attention or fight to keep his interest. Instead, she turned inward. She revisited the things she loved, the books she once got lost in, the projects that fueled her passion, the hobbies she had put aside in an attempt to hold on to something that was already slipping away. And as she did, she realized something important. She had been so focused on keeping him that she had forgotten to keep herself. A Stoic woman does not grieve the loss of who someone used to be. She does not attempt to hold on to a version of a person who has already chosen to become someone else. She observes, she accepts, and she moves forward. If a man stops seeing you the way he once did, if he no longer values the things that once made him love you, do not shrink yourself to fit his new world. Let him go. Not with bitterness, not with regret, but with the quiet understanding that you deserve someone who sees you for who you are and never stops choosing you. 4. No more fighting for the relationship. A man who loves you fights for you. Even when things are difficult, even when there's tension, even when he's upset, he still chooses to show up. Because love isn't about perfection, it's about commitment. But when his love begins to fade, something changes. It's not the fights that hurt the most. It's when the fights stop mattering, when the discussions turn into silence, when he stops caring enough to argue. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. At first, you don't recognize it for what it is. You think maybe he's just tired. Maybe he's avoiding conflict. Maybe he just wants peace. But deep down, you know, a man who is still invested will want to fix what's broken. He will work through the hard conversations. But when he starts pulling away, when he no longer sees the point in resolving anything, that's when you know. His heart has already begun to leave. Alana knew this feeling well. She and her husband used to believe that conflict was healthy, that working through issues together made them stronger. In the beginning, they both put effort into understanding each other, into listening, into finding solutions. Then, little by little, things changed. At first, it was subtle. He started withdrawing from the conversations. He would sigh instead of responding. His eyes would glaze over when she tried to explain how she felt. And slowly, the dynamic shifted. Arguments were no longer two people working through a problem together. They became something else. Every time Alana brought up an issue, she felt like she was talking to herself. He didn't defend his actions. He didn't explain his thoughts. He just shut down. "I don't want to fight. Why do you always make things so dramatic? You're overreacting." She started doubting herself. Was she asking for too much? Was she the problem? But the truth was, she wasn't being difficult. She wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. She was simply fighting for something he had already stopped believing in. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And that's what happens when you try to hold on to someone who has already let go. You suffer in the space between what you wish for and what is. You convince yourself that if you just say it differently, If you just try harder, if you just become less difficult, he will come back. But love does not respond to begging. It does not return through force. And a man who no longer fights for you has already made his choice. Imagine standing on a bridge, holding a rope. On the other end is the person you love. At first, he's pulling too. He's meeting you halfway, making sure the connection stays strong. But one day, his grip loosens. You pull harder, thinking he just needs encouragement. Thinking if you try a little more, he'll tighten his grip again. But no matter how much you hold on, no matter how much strength you put into it, the rope keeps slipping. And then, one day, you realize he's no longer holding it at all. You're the only one left. Still grasping, still pulling, still trying. But there's nothing on the other end anymore. A Stoic woman does not waste her strength holding on to a connection that no longer exists. She does not exhaust herself trying to fix something alone. She sees what is real. She recognizes when effort is no longer being matched. And she makes a choice. If a man no longer meets you in the middle, if he no longer fights for the relationship, do not fight for it alone. Let go of the rope. Not because you gave up, but because you finally understood. Love is only real when two people are still holding on. 5. Future plans. Disappear love is about building a future together. It's in the way two people talk about next year, next summer, next weekend, together. When a man loves you, he includes you in his plans effortlessly, instinctively, as if the idea of a future without you doesn't even exist. But when his love fades, the future starts shrinking. The we that once filled your conversation slowly turns into I. The plans that used to include you start to disappear, replaced by vague answers and half-hearted commitments. He still talks about travel, about work, about life. But now, you are no longer a part of it. Dylan and Margot had been together for 4 years. In the beginning, they built their world as a team. They had lists of places they wanted to visit, dreams they wanted to chase, a future they were excited to create. Margot would talk about where they might live someday, and Dylan would smile and add to the vision. They were planning a life, not just existing in the present. But then things changed. At first, Margot didn't notice. The shift was subtle. Dylan still spoke about the future, but his words felt different. When she mentioned a trip they had dreamed of, he hesitated. Maybe, we'll see. When she brought up their long-term plans, his responses became vague. I'm not sure yet. And then, one evening, she heard it. She was sitting beside him, scrolling through an old list they had made together. Places they wanted to visit, restaurants they wanted to try. She smiled and asked, "Which one should we do first?" Dylan didn't look up. "I was thinking of going to Italy next year." Margot froze. "We were thinking of going to Italy next year." That's what it used to be. Now it was, "I was thinking." The weight of that one word settled in her chest. A Stoic does not dwell on illusions. Epictetus once said, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." And that is the truth Margot faced. When a man's love is strong, he includes you in his vision of the future. When it fades, you become an afterthought. A relationship is like a shared road. At first, two people walk side by side, heading in the same direction. The journey is clear, the destination mutual, but sometimes one person takes a step ahead, then another, and another. At first, you try to keep pace, thinking it's just temporary. But eventually you realize he's no longer walking beside you. You can run after him. Try to close the gap. Try to remind him of the plans you once made together. Or you can stop, take a breath, and understand something deeper. path you thought you were on together no longer exists. Margot didn't fight for the plans they once had. She didn't beg for a space in his future. Instead, she turned inward. She asked herself the one question that mattered most. If he no longer sees me in his tomorrow, why should I keep him in mine? A Stoic woman does not chase a disappearing future. She does not hold on to a dream when reality has already rewritten it. She sees the shift, acknowledges it, and makes a choice. If a man is no longer building a future with you, do not waste your present waiting for him to change his mind. Choose yourself. Step forward. Create a future that is yours, whether he is in it or not. 6. He hasn't left, but his heart. His love doesn't disappear overnight. It doesn't break like glass. It erodes like stone against water, slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you realize there's nothing left to hold on to. A man can still be there, sitting next to you, eating dinner with you, sharing the same bed. But if you look closely, you'll see it. The emptiness in his eyes, the distance in his touch, the way he no longer leans into you, no longer lingers when he kisses you, no longer reaches for you in the middle of the night. At first, you ignore it. You tell yourself he's just tired, just stressed, just distracted. You convince yourself that things will go back to normal, that he still loves you, that he's just going through something. But then, days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and you realize this is not a phase. This is a slow goodbye. A man doesn't always walk away the moment he stops loving you. Sometimes he stays out of habit, out of obligation, out of the comfort of routine. But love is not about being physically present. It's about being there in every way that matters. And when his heart begins to drift, you can feel it. In the silence that stretches between you, in the way conversations feel forced, in how he touches you like you are something fragile, something distant, something no longer his. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." A woman who refuses to see the truth will suffer, not because of what is happening, but because of the illusion she clings to. She will tell herself that if he's still here, there's still a chance. That if she just tries harder, loves him more, makes herself more appealing, he will come back. But love does not respond to desperation. It does not rekindle through force. And a man who is already emotionally gone cannot be convinced to stay. Picture a candle that has been burning for hours. The flame was once bright, strong, full of warmth, but as time passes, it grows smaller. It flickers. It weakens. And then, without warning, it goes out. You can relight the wick, but the wax is already melted. The candle is spent. It will never burn the same way again. This is what happens when love fades. It is not your fault. It is not something you did wrong, nor something you failed to be. It is simply what happens when love is no longer nurtured, when one person begins to see the relationship as a weight rather than a gift. The mistake many women make is believing that their effort alone can bring him back. They try harder. They become softer, more patient, more understanding. They suppress their own needs, their own pain, just to keep him from slipping further away. But a woman should never have to convince a man to love her. She should never have to beg for presence, for attention, for effort. A Stoic woman knows that true love is not something that needs to be chased. If a man's heart is already walking away, she does not run after it. She does not drown in self-doubt, wondering what she could have done differently. She accepts the reality in front of her. If he is still physically there but emotionally absent, she does not wait for him to leave. She leaves first. Because love is not about possession. It is about presence. And a woman who knows her worth does not settle for a love that only exists in memory. 7. Don't chase. Let him go. You cannot stop a leaf from falling in autumn, just as you cannot force someone to love you when their heart has already changed. Love is not a negotiation, nor a battle to be won. It is not something you can hold onto through force. When a man starts to pull away, you will feel it before he even says it. And when that moment comes, you have two choices. You can chase him, trying to reignite something that is already burned out, or you can let him go with grace. Many women make the mistake of believing that if they just try harder, love will return. They think that if they become more understanding, more patient, more forgiving, he will remember what he once felt. But love does not work that way. A man who truly values you will never put you in a position where you feel you must convince him to stay. Seneca once said, "A gift consists not in what is done or given, but in the intention of the giver." Love is the same. It is not about how much you give, how much you sacrifice, or how much you fight for it. It is about whether or not it is freely given in return. If a man is no longer giving you his love willingly, then what are you really fighting for? Imagine standing in front of a door. On the other side is a man you love. You knock. At first, he opens it, welcomes you in, makes you feel at home. But slowly things change. He no longer meets you at the door. He takes longer and longer to respond. And one day, you realize you are knocking, but he is no longer answering. What do? A woman who does not understand her worth will keep knocking. She will keep waiting. She will tell herself that if she just stays long enough, if she just says the right words, he will open the door again. But a woman who knows her worth, she does not wait where she is not wanted. She does not keep knocking on a door that is already closed. She turns around and walks away. Not because she doesn't care, not because it is easy, but because she understands that love should never require begging. When you chase a man who is pulling away, you are telling him and yourself that your value depends on whether or not he chooses you, that his presence is more important than your self-respect. But the moment you stop chasing, something incredible happens. You reclaim your power. You shift your focus from what is slipping away to what is still within you. You remember who you are. And instead of waiting for him to see your worth, you see it for yourself. A Stoic woman does not beg for love. She does not plead for attention. She does not wait in the doorway, hoping someone will invite her in. She knows that when one love fades, another will come. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even soon, but eventually, love will find her again. Not because she chased it, but because she became the kind of woman who no longer needs to. If a man wants to leave, open the door for him. Not with anger, not with sorrow, but with quiet confidence, knowing that his departure is not your loss. It is your liberation. 8. You haven't lost love. You're opening a new chapter. A man leaving is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a new one. Most women see heartbreak as a loss. They feel abandoned, rejected, as if something precious has been taken from them. They grieve, not just for the relationship, but for the version of themselves that existed when they were loved. They mourn the laughter, the warmth, the shared dreams that now feel like distant echoes. But what if heartbreak was not something to be feared? What if instead of loss, you saw it as transformation? Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." A Stoic woman understands this. She knows that love, like everything in life, is fleeting. It flows in and out, shaping us, teaching us, but it is never truly ours to possess. When someone walks away, they are not taking love with them. They are making space for something greater. But most women do not see it that way. They hold on to the past like a book they refuse to close, rereading the same chapters, searching for a different ending. They resist change because they fear the unknown. But what they do not realize is this: the unknown is where all possibilities exist. Imagine a woman standing in front of a mirror. She sees herself as incomplete, as someone who has been left behind. But what if, instead, she saw herself as a blank canvas, not broken but unshaped, not abandoned but set free? Think of a garden in winter. The flowers that once bloomed are now gone, the branches bare. To the untrained eye, it looks like death. But beneath the soil, something is happening. The roots are deepening. The earth is resting, preparing. And when the time is right, life will return, stronger, more vibrant than before. This is how love works. It does not leave you empty. It leaves you open. Open to new experiences, new wisdom, new love, but only if you let it. Most women do not let go. They grip tightly to the ghost of what was, whispering to it, pleading with it to return. But love is not something you can hold on to. It is like water. It flows where it must. The harder you try to grasp it, the more it slips through your fingers. A Stoic woman does not resist the tide. She does not waste her strength trying to hold on to something that no longer wishes to stay. She understands that life is always moving, and the woman who moves with it is the one who truly lives. When a man leaves, you have two choices. You can mourn the door that has closed, or you can turn and see the endless doors that are now open. A man walking away does not diminish your worth. He does not take anything from you that you cannot rebuild on your own. If anything, he gives you a gift, the chance to rediscover yourself, to reclaim the energy you once poured into him, and redirect it towards something far more valuable: your own growth. A Stoic woman does not see herself as incomplete without a man. She does not measure her worth by who stays or who leaves. She stands tall, knowing that her value is not determined by another's ability to see it. If a man walks away, she does not beg him to return. She does not chase the past. She looks forward, because life is always moving. And love, true love, the kind that does not need to be forced, will find her again. Love at its core is never truly lost. It moves, transforms, and sometimes it leaves. Not to punish you, but to set you free. If a man's love fades, it is not a reflection of your worth, but a reminder of life's impermanence. A Stoic woman does not dwell on what she cannot control. She does not fight for someone who has already let go. Instead, she turns inward, finding strength in herself rather than seeking validation in another. The lessons are simple but powerful. When love begins to withdraw, do not chase, observe. When a man's presence fades, do not beg, accept. When the plans you once built together dissolve, do not mourn, create new ones. Every experience, even heartbreak, is an opportunity to grow, to redefine yourself, and to step into a new version of your life with dignity and grace. Seneca once said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." This is your journey, not his, not anyone else's, yours. So choose yourself every single time. Learn to sit with solitude, to embrace change, to let go without bitterness. And most importantly, move forward. If this resonates with you, share your story in the comments. Tell us about your journey, your strength, and how you've learned to let go. Because the most powerful thing a woman can do is recognize that she was never meant to beg for love. She was meant to embody it.